Let's talk about something else we need to focus on this morning, and that is politics. The British Prime Minister and the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, have argued each side of the Brexit issue in a TV special last night.
In area after area after area, things that affect our great country, we would have no say over. When we want to try and make sure Iran can't get a nuclear weapon, when we want to be strong in front of Putin's aggression in the Ukraine, we need to work in these organisations. We need to work in NATO. We need to work in the UN. And yes, we need to work in the EU. Sometimes it can drive me mad, right? It is a bureaucracy. It is frustrating. But I honestly believe walking away, quitting, would reduce our national influence, would reduce our economy, would reduce our say in the world, and as a result would damage our country.
Well, let's just say they decide to cut off their nose to spite their face with their biggest export market in the world. Do you know what? If they put tariffs on us, those tariffs will be significantly lower than our net financial contribution. So no deal is better than the rotten deal that we've got at the moment.
Phillip Blond from ResPublica joins us now with his view on where we stand with the two sides of this debate. Good morning to you, Philip.
Good morning.
To my mind, what happened last night was just a reiteration of the fact that David Cameron doesn't have an answer on immigration and that the Out campaign does not have an answer on the economy. Didn't really change much, in my view, in terms of the way we sit. Did it change much in your view?
What I think is going on is both sides are being negative. And the calculation from the British government that seems incapable of running anything other than negative campaigns from Scotland through to the mayoral London election is that this will cause people to stay in the EU. But I think it's compounding effect, making people withdraw to Britain. I think the negative approach followed by both parties is increasing support for Brexit. Acts is a positive view of the EU. What we have instead is a negative view. You know, it'd be worse if we leave. We need a vision of British leadership in the EU, broad sunlit uplands, and we're not getting that. So actually I think the government strategy is backfiring because the EU is now identified in people's minds as the site of great danger, of entropy, out of control, migration, terrorism, economy. So people will retreat. When people see fear and identify with fear, and both camps are foolishly giving us fear, they will retreat into protectionism. And if the EU is identified with sort of global risks, people will become protectionists. I think the government desperately needs, and the Remain camp desperately needs, to give a positive view of the European Union and a way in which Britain can help lead it. And Britain can lead the EU, especially because the euro area is in such a dreadful crisis.
Matt? Breaking news.
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at the Bund here, and I had been looking at a 3-month chart, but it's more interesting, I think, to look at a chart of the intraday trade because it's dropping now below 0.4%, which is pretty amazing. Sorry, let me get that screen out of the way for you. Right now, we're looking at a yield of 0.39% on the Bund, and it's just an incredible move to watch. This is a record low for German 10-year yields.
And let's bring that into the conversation we're having with Phillip Blond. Philip, this is an example of a lack of growth in Europe. This is an example of what is going wrong with Europe, some would argue, the inability to get growth going being reflected in the German bond market. It is a struggle, do you think, to make that positive case? Yes, British leadership is there. Yes, Britain has won some of the critical arguments on the euro, on the free movement of goods, on kind of some of the critical. The British people don't feel as if they're on the front foot when it comes to Europe.
Well, look, Europe isn't looking good. You know, Europe was originally construed to pull Germany into something greater than herself. Now, because the euro, which I think has been a disastrous project, is essentially creating German hegemony in Europe again. And because of the way the euro favours Germany on a structural basis, it's making it impossible for southern Europe to grow. France has been weakened dreadfully. Pew Research has recently today released
amazing numbers
showing that in France only 38% of people are now in favour of the European Union, 62% against. That's higher than the UK. So I think we're on the brink of a European-wide Eurozone breakup. I think, and the tragedy tragedy is the euro has created a situation that demands political centralisation to solve the problems of the euro, but it's exactly that which is so unpopular. And I think we're on the brink of something really catastrophic in Europe. And if Britain votes for Brexit, which looks possible, it could all come apart.
Well, we're certainly feeling that in the bond market right now. I mean, Bund's now yielding 0.35%, continuing to fall this morning. Let me ask you what happens, though, if there's a solid Remain vote, Philip. If we get a solid Remain vote, does everything go back to normal? Is everything better again? Do people, even the French and the Germans, or most importantly the French and the Germans, feel better about the EU then?
Well, if we get a solid Remain vote, what will happen is we have a tremendous political and economic opportunity. What we desperately need Britain to do, and to be fair, Britain hasn't done this. Britain's been like a sullen, recalcitrant child in the European Union. But if we had British leadership, Britain could come in and say, look, let's face the facts as they are. The Eurozone isn't working. A dual core Europe. We've got to create a position whereby southern countries can exit the euro. For instance, forget Greece. Italy hasn't had a single quarter of GDP growth since it entered the euro. The euro doesn't work. We have to save the European project by in sense limiting the reach and scope of the common currency. And Britain could lead on that because all commentators now recognise this is the fundamental problem. So what we will have if Britain votes to stay in is the real possibility of British leadership, and Britain can once more seek to stabilise Europe. That's what we all must hope for.
Speaking of, politics and stability, the presidential race in the U.S. is taking really an historic turn. Hillary Clinton has declared herself the victor in the Democratic nomination. She'll be the first woman candidate for president from a major party in U.S. history. What do you think about how that election's shaping up? Because this same sort of populism and unrest that's pushing maybe Britons towards an exit from the EU is pushing Americans to support people like Donald Trump, people like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, what we're seeing is that globalization, which people of Hillary's generation have long advocated for the last 30 or 40 years, actually destroyed the working class in the Western world, and now it risks destroying the middle class. And the thing is Marx was wrong. It's not the working class that are the revolutionary proletariat, it's the middle class. And if the middle class across the Western world see no future or see enormous economic insecurity because of computerization, robotization and competition from outside the West, they are going to vote for security. And Trump expresses that, Front National in France expresses that, the Brexit vote expresses that. So what we don't have is an economic model in the West that can offer the middle and working class, and that is a very dangerous mix, and that means that what we're going to see are very radical, arguably even revolutionary developments, and that's not good, I would argue, for anybody.
Philip, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for sharing with us your thoughts this morning. Phillip Blond, the ResPublica director.